The courthouse in Portland smelled like rain and old paperwork. I sat at the defendant's table, my fingers resting on a locked metal box that weighed maybe 3 pounds, but felt like it held the weight of my entire future. Across the aisle, my father sat with his second wife, Barbara, flanked by an attorney who cost $600 an hour and looked like he knew it. Judge Patricia Moreno reviewed the documents before her, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and an expression that suggested she'd heard every sob story and legal argument twice already. "Let me make sure I understand the situation," she said, looking up. "Mrs. Eleanor Chun passed away 14 months ago. Her will left her entire estate valued at approximately $2.7 million to her daughter. The defendant, Lily Chun. The plaintiff, Mr. Robert Chun, Eleanor's ex-husband, is contesting the will on the grounds that Eleanor was not of sound mind when she executed it." "That's correct, Your Honor," said Gregory Walsh, my father's attorney. He was mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of practiced confidence that came from winning more cases than he lost. "My client was married to Eleanor Chun for 18 years. He knew her well, and he can attest that in the final year of her life, she exhibited signs of dementia, confusion, and susceptibility to undue influence." I kept my hands very still on the metal box. Judge Moreno looked at me. "Ms. Chun, do you have representation?" "No, Your Honor. I'm representing myself." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "That's generally not advisable in estate litigation." "I understand, Your Honor, but I believe the evidence speaks for itself." Walsh smiled the kind of smile a shark might give if sharks practiced law. "Your Honor, the defendant is 28 years old. She has no legal training. Her mother passed away after a long illness, and in that final year, Ms. Chun had exclusive access to her. The timing of the will executed just 6 weeks before Eleanor's death is highly suspicious." "My mother was perfectly lucid," I said quietly. "According to you," Walsh countered. "But you're hardly an objective witness. You're the sole beneficiary of a $2.7 million estate. Of course you'd claim she was competent." Judge Moreno held up her hand. "Mr. Walsh, let's proceed systematically. What evidence do you have that Mrs. Chun was not of sound mind?" Walsh pulled out a folder. "We have testimony from 3 witnesses: Chun himself, his wife, Barbara, and Eleanor's sister, Margaret Hall, stating that, in the months before her death, Eleanor was confused, forgetful, and easily manipulated. We have medical records showing she was on significant pain medication for stage 4 lung cancer. And we have the testimony of 2 handwriting experts who analyzed the signature on the will and found inconsistencies with her known signature." He slid documents across to the judge. "Your Honor, Eleanor Chun was dying. She was medicated. She was in pain. And her daughter took advantage of that vulnerable state to convince her to sign away everything to her, completely cutting out the man Eleanor was married to for nearly 2 decades. They were divorced," I said. "They were divorced," Walsh acknowledged, "but they remained close. My client visited Eleanor regularly during her illness. He cared for her, lob, and he believes, reasonably, that he should have been included in her estate, particularly given that much of the wealth was accumulated during their marriage." Judge Moreno looked at me. "Ms. Chun, do you have evidence to rebut these claims?" "Yes, Your Honor. Please, present it." I pulled out my own folder, much thinner than Walsh's, which I knew would worry him. In my experience, the truth didn't need hundreds of pages to make its point. First, my mother's oncologist, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, will testify that my mother was mentally sharp until her final 48 hours. The pain medication she was on was carefully calibrated to manage her symptoms without causing cognitive impairment. Dr. Rodriguez can provide detailed medical records supporting this. I slid the doctor's affidavit across to the judge. Second, my mother's hospice nurse, Peter Kowalski, was present when she signed the will. He's prepared to testify that she was lucid, alert, and made her decisions freely without any pressure from me. Another document. Third, the notary who witnessed the signing, Janet Liu, will confirm that my mother appeared to understand exactly what she was signing and expressed her wishes clearly. Judge Moreno reviewed the documents. These are compelling witnesses. Ms. Chun. Walsh stood. Your Honor, with all due respect, these are people who were employed to care for Eleanor. They had professional relationships with the defendant. Their testimony is hardly objective. Neither is your client's, I said. He's trying to claim money from his ex-wife's estate. Of course, he's going to say she was incompetent. That's enough, Judge Moreno said. Ms. Chun, do you have anything else? This was it, the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading for 8 months. I lifted the metal box and placed it on the defense table. Your Honor, I'd like to present the contents of this box. It was locked in my mother's safe deposit box at First National Bank. I opened it 2 weeks ago in the presence of a notary. The contents have not been altered or tampered with. Walsh leaned forward, his eyes on the box. What is it? Documentation, I said simply. Of what? I looked at Judge Moreno.
Your Honor, before I open this box, I need to tell you about my mother's career.
Eleanor Chun worked for the Department of Defense for 27 years. She was a senior intelligence analyst. Much of her work was classified. Walsh actually laughed. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The defendant is now claiming her mother was some kind of spy. This is a desperate attempt to lie. I'm not claiming anything, I interrupted. I'm stating facts. My mother held a top-secret SCI clearance. She worked on projects that, even after her death, remain classified, and she documented some of that work in ways that are relevant to this case. Judge Moreno's expression had changed. She was paying attention now. Really, paying attention. Ms. Chun, if you're about to present classified information in my courtroom, I'm not, Your Honor. What I'm about to show you has been cleared for disclosure by the appropriate authorities. I spent the last 3 months getting the necessary permissions. That was a lie, but a necessary one. I'd actually spent the last 3 months figuring out what I could safely reveal without violating national security laws. The line was thin, but I'd found it. I pulled a key from my pocket and unlocked the metal box. Inside were 3 items: a leather journal, a sealed envelope, and a single photograph. I pulled out the photograph first and handed it to the bailiff to pass to the judge. Judge Moreno looked at it, and I watched her face carefully. The photo showed my mother in military dress uniform, standing next to a tall man with 4 stars on his shoulder, 4-star general. Behind them was a sign that read Operation Summer Lantern Command Center. This photo was taken in 1996, I said. That's General David Moreno. He was my mother's commanding officer for Operation Summer Lantern, a classified intelligence operation. My mother served under him for 3 years. Judge Moreno's face had gone completely white. She set the photo down very carefully, her hands not quite steady. Your Honor, I continued, General Moreno was your father. He passed away in 2003 from a heart attack. You were 33 years old at the time. The courtroom was dead silent. Walsh stood up. Your Honor, I object to this entire line of sit down. Mr. Walsh, Judge Moreno said quietly. Her voice had changed. It was harder now, sharper. Sut. She looked at me. How do you know about my father? Because my mother told me. Before she died, she told me about Operation Summer Lantern. She told me about General She told me he was a great man, a brilliant strategist, and someone she trusted with her life. I pulled out the journal. Your Honor, this is my mother's personal journal from 1996 to 1998. It is not classified. She was careful about what she wrote, but it documents her work during Operation Summer Lantern and her interactions with your father. Judge Moreno's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the journal. May I? Of course. She opened it, flipping through pages. I knew what she was seeing: my mother's neat handwriting, documenting meetings, conversations, decisions, references to General M or the General Throat. She stopped on a page and read silently. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. This entry is dated June 12, 1997. Your mother wrote about my father's concerns about security leaks. She wrote, ... double quotes. The judge's voice caught. She wrote that he stayed up all night reviewing protocols because he refused to put his team at risk. That sounds like him, Primera sighed softly. From what my mother told me, your father was someone who put his people first. Always? He was. Judge Moreno closed the journal carefully. Ms. Chun, why are you showing me this? Because my mother wanted someone to know the truth about Operation Summer Lantern, and because she knew that if anyone ever questioned her mental competence, this journal would prove that she was one of the most brilliant, careful, meticulous people who ever worked in intelligence. I pulled out the sealed envelope. This letter is addressed to you. My mother wrote it 8 years ago, long before she got sick. She sealed it and put it in her safe deposit box with instructions that if she died and someone contested her will, this letter should be delivered to whatever judge presided over the case. Judge Moreno took the envelope. Her name was written on the front in my mother's handwriting. Judge Patricia Moreno. How did she know I'd be the judge? She didn't. But she knew you were a judge in Portland, and she knew that estate cases in this jurisdiction have a limited rotation. It was a calculated risk. Judge Moreno opened the envelope with careful fingers and pulled out 3 handwritten pages. She read them silently while the entire courtroom waited. I watched my father's face. He looked confused, angry, and increasingly worried. Barbara whispered something to him, but he shook his head. Finally, Judge Moreno finished reading. She folded the letter carefully and set it down. Mr. Walsh, she said, your client claims that Eleanor Chun was not of sound mind when she executed her will 6 weeks before her death. That's correct, Your Honor. And you've presented evidence that she was forgetful, confused, and easily manipulated. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Moreno picked up my mother's journal. This journal spans 3 years of classified intelligence work. The entries are detailed, precise, and demonstrate extraordinary cognitive ability. Eleanor Chun tracked multiple operations simultaneously, identified security risks before they became critical, and provided analysis that, according to this letter, saved lives. She looked at my father. Mr. Chun, when exactly did you notice your ex-wife becoming forgetful and confused? My father stood uncertainly. In her last year, maybe the last 8 months. And during that time, did you know she was writing letters? Making plans? Documenting her wishes? I don't know what she was doing. I just know she seemed confused when I visited. Did you visit often? He hesitated. A few times. How many times, exactly? Maybe, 5 or 6 times, in the last year. Judge Moreno turned to me. Miss Chun, how often did you visit your mother during her final year? Every day, Your Honor, sometimes twice a day when her symptoms were worse. And during those visits, did she seem confused to you? Not until her final week. She was in pain, but her mind was clear. She talked about her work, the unclassified parts. She told me stories about your father. She made sure I knew where all her important documents were. She was preparing for the end, but she was doing it with full awareness. Judge Moreno nodded slowly. Mr. Walsh, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Did your client know about Eleanor Chun's intelligence work? Walsh looked at my father, who shook his head. No, Your Honor. Mr. Chun was not aware of the classified nature of his ex-wife's career. So when he was married to her for 18 years, he never knew what she actually did for a living. She told him she worked for the Department of Defense in an administrative capacity. An administrative capacity, Judge Moreno repeated. She held up the photos of my mother with General Does this look like an administrative position to you? Walsh had no answer. Judge Moreno continued. Here's what I think happened. Eleanor Chun spent her entire adult life doing work that required exceptional mental acuity, careful documentation, and absolute precision. She couldn't tell her husband about that work. It was classified. So he assumed she had some routine government job. When they divorced, he continued to underestimate her. And when she got sick, he assumed that because she had cancer, she must be incompetent. She picked up my mother's letter, but Eleanor Chun was not incompetent, even dying, even in pain. She was thinking ahead. She wrote this letter 8 years ago, anticipating exactly this situation. She documented her wishes clearly. She prepared her daughter for the legal challenges that would come, and she left evidence that would prove, beyond any doubt, that she knew exactly what she was doing. Walsh stood. Your Honor, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. The defendant has presented information about classified operations, references to the judge's deceased father, emotional appeals. Mr. Walsh, I'm going to stop you right there. My father's involvement in Operation Summer Lantern is a matter of public record. He received the Distinguished Service Medal for his work on that operation in 1998. Eleanor Chun's participation is also documented, though the details remain classified. There's nothing irregular about the defendant presenting evidence of her mother's professional competence. She looked at the documents before her. What is irregular is your client's claim that a woman who spent 27 years doing classified intelligence work suddenly became incompetent in her final months, despite medical evidence to the contrary, despite testimony from multiple credible witnesses, and despite documentation that shows she was preparing for her death, with the same careful precision she brought to everything else in her life. My father stood up. Your Honor, please. I loved Eleanor. I'm not trying to take advantage. I just think, you think what, Mr. Chun? That you're entitled to her money because you were married to her 20 years ago. That you deserve her estate because you visited 5 or 6 times during her final year while your daughter visited every day. We had a life together. We built that wealth together. Actually, I said quietly, you didn't. Most of Mom's wealth came from her work after the divorce. Her government pension, her investments, her savings. She accumulated 90% of it in the 15 years after you separated. Judge Moreno checked the financial documents. Ms. Chun is correct. At the time of the divorce in 2009, the marital assets were divided equally. Everything Eleanor Chun accumulated after that was hers alone. Mr. Chun, you have no legal claim to her post-divorce assets. Walsh was scrambling now. Your Honor, even if the bulk of the estate is post-divorce, surely there's some consideration for what? For being her ex-husband? For visiting her 5 times while she was dying? For filing a lawsuit claiming she was incompetent when all evidence suggests she was one of the most competent people in this courtroom? She picked up the journal again. I'm going to be very clear about something. My father spoke about Operation Summer Lantern exactly once before he died. He told me it was the most important work he'd ever done, and that the people he worked with were the best and brightest America had to offer. He never mentioned Eleanor Chun by name. He couldn't. It was classified. But reading this journal, seeing her analytical precision, her careful documentation, her dedication, I know she was one of the people he meant. Judge Moreno looked at my father. Mr. Chun, your ex-wife, was a remarkable woman. She dedicated her life to serving this country in ways you'll never fully understand. She raised a daughter who clearly inherited her intelligence and her integrity. And in her final months, she made decisions about her legacy that were completely rational and well documented. She banged her gavel once. This will contest is dismissed. Eleanor Chun's will stands as written. Her entire estate passes to her daughter, Lily Chun. Mr. Chun, you are responsible for all legal costs associated with this action. This court is adjourned. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot for 20 minutes, my hands still shaking. The metal box sat in the passenger seat, containing my mother's journal, the letter to Judge Moreno, and the photograph that had changed everything. My phone rang. It was Rachel Torres, the probate attorney who'd been quietly advising me throughout the case, not officially representing me, but helping me understand the process and prepare my defense. Lily, I just heard. Congratulations. Thank you. You? I still can't believe it worked. Your mother was brilliant, planning for this contingency 8 years in advance. Documenting everything, that's next-level strategic thinking. She learned from the best. General Moreno taught her that preparation was everything. The judge's father. Yeah. Mom told me about him in her final weeks. She said he was the kind of leader who thought 10 steps ahead. She modeled her entire approach to life after his example. Did she really know Judge Moreno would hear the case? Not for certain. But she did her research. She knew Judge Moreno was one of 3 judges who handled estate litigation in this district. She knew that if Dad contested the will, there was a strong chance it would land on her desk. And the letter? Mom wrote 3 letters, 1 to each of the 3 possible judges. She put them all in the safe deposit box, with instructions about which one to use, depending on who presided over the case. Rachel laughed. That's incredible. What did the other 2 letters say? That was real, too. You can't fake that kind of emotion. Reading about her father, seeing evidence of his work, understanding what Operation Summer Lantern meant, it mattered to her. I looked at the journal on the seat beside me. Mom knew that the best defense against a competency challenge was to prove she'd always been exceptionally competent. That journal doesn't just show she was lucid in her final weeks, it shows she was brilliant her entire career. Your father never stood a chance, did he? No. He never took Mom seriously. He thought she was just an administrative assistant at the DOD. He had no idea who she really was. Do you think he'll appeal? He can't. Judge Moreno's ruling was based on clear evidence and multiple credible witnesses. An appeal would just cost him more money he doesn't have. He's done. How do you feel? I thought about it. Relieved, tired, and really grateful that my mother loved me enough to prepare for this. I drove to the cemetery where Mom was buried. Her grave was on a hill overlooking the river, marked with a simple stone, Eleanor Chun, 1964 to 2024. Beloved mother and patriot. I sat on the grass next to her grave and pulled out the journal. We won, Mom, I said. Dad's lawsuit is dismissed. The will stands. Everything you worked for comes to me, just like you wanted. The wind rustled through the trees. I could almost hear her voice. Of course we won. I planned for every contingency. You really did. The letter to Judge Moreno was brilliant. The way you told stories about her father, showed him respect, demonstrated your competence. She couldn't rule against me after reading that. I opened the journal to a random page. Mom's handwriting was neat and precise, documenting a meeting from June 1997. General M insisted we review protocols again, said his daughter Patricia just passed the bar exam and wants to be a prosecutor. He was so proud. Said she inherited his sense of justice. I told him justice requires both intelligence and empathy. He agreed. I closed the journal carefully. You knew Judge Moreno would hear the case, didn't you? You researched her. You found the connection to her father, and you left breadcrumbs that would matter to her specifically. More wind in the trees? Dad called you and he said you were confused and easily manipulated, but you were 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. Just like General Moreno taught you. I traced Mom's name on the gravestone. I miss you. I wish you were here to see this. To see Dad's face when the judge dismissed his case. To see how everything you planned worked perfectly. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Judge Moreno. I wanted to let you know that I've forwarded your mother's journal entries about my father to the Naval History Center. They're compiling a comprehensive history of Operation Summer Lantern now that portions have been Your mother's perspective will be invaluable. Thank you for sharing it. Primera texted Bike. Thank you for honoring her memory. She spoke of your father with great respect. Another text arrived. I read her entire letter 3 times. She wrote that if I was reading it, it meant someone had questioned her judgment. She said she trusted me to see the truth because I was David Moreno's daughter, and his children inherited his ability to recognize competence when they saw it. Your mother understood people, Lily. That's a rare gift. She did, I typed. Thank you for seeing what she wanted you to see. That evening, I returned to Mom's house, my house now. It was a small craftsman in a quiet neighborhood, paid off 15 years ago. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. The kind of place Mom liked, practical, efficient, I went to her office and opened the safe where I'd found the metal box. Inside were more documents: her will, her life insurance policies, her investment accounts, everything organized with perfect precision. There was also a sealed envelope with my name on it. I'd found it the day after Mom died but hadn't been able to open it. Now felt like the right time. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter in Mom's handwriting, dated 6 weeks before she died, the same day she'd signed her will. My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if the timeline went as I predicted, your father probably contested my will. He always underestimated me, even when we were married. I'm sure he assumed I couldn't have earned this much money, couldn't have planned this carefully, couldn't have outsmarted him one final time. But you and I know better. I've spent my entire adult life working in intelligence. My job was to anticipate threats, plan for contingencies, and ensure that good people were protected from those who would harm them. When I got sick, I applied those same principles to protecting you. I knew your father would challenge my will. I knew he'd claim I was incompetent. So I built a defense that would be unassailable. The journal, the letters, the documentation, all of it designed to prove that even dying, I was thinking more clearly than he ever has. I researched the judges who handle estate cases. I found the connection to General Moore. I wrote letters that would appeal to their specific backgrounds and experiences. And I left you with the tools to win. You might think that's cold or calculating. But Lily, protecting the people you love isn't cold, it's necessary. I spent 27 years protecting this country from threats most people will never know about. Protecting you from your father's greed was just one more mission. And like all my missions, I planned to succeed. The money I'm leaving you isn't just money, it's freedom. Freedom to build the life you want without financial stress. Freedom to pursue your dreams without compromise. Freedom to be yourself without anyone telling you you're not good enough. Your father tried to make you doubt yourself for years. He said you were too emotional, too soft, not strategic enough. But you're my daughter. You inherited my intelligence, my planning skills, and my ability to see 10 steps ahead. Never let anyone make you forget that. Use this money wisely. Invest it. Grow Italiano. And when you have children someday, teach them what I taught you. That the best defense is preparation. That competence speaks louder than credentials. And that family isn't about biology, it's about who shows up when it matters. I showed up for you every day of your life. You showed up for me every day of my death. That's what family means. I love you, Lily. More than I ever had the clearance to say out loud. You made everything worthwhile. Stay brilliant. Stay strategic. Stay 10 steps ahead. Love always, Mom. P.S. The other 2 letters I wrote, the ones for the judges who did unhear the case, are in the safe deposit box. Read them if you want. They're not as personal as the Moreno letter, but they would have worked just as well. I prepared for every possibility, just like you should always do. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Mom had been right about everything. About Dad contesting the will, about needing unassailable evidence, about preparing for every possibility. She'd been 10 steps ahead until the very end, just like General Moreno taught her. Just like she taught me. 6 months later, I used part of Mom's estate to establish the Eleanor Chun Intelligence Scholarship, a fund for women pursuing careers in national security and intelligence analysis. The first recipient was a brilliant 22-year-old who reminded me of Mom at that age. Sharp, strategic, and determined to serve her country. At the scholarship award ceremony, Judge Patricia Moreno was the keynote speaker. She talked about her father, about Operation Summer Lantern, and about the dedicated professionals who worked alongside him, people like my mother, whose names would never be widely known but whose work made America safer. After her speech, she approached me. Your mother would be proud of this scholarship. I hope so. I wanted to honor her legacy. You're doing more than that. You're continuing her mission, investing in the next generation of intelligence professionals who will help protect this country. The way she did. She taught me to think ahead. To plan for the future. To make sure important work continues even after we're gone. Judge Moreno smiled. She learned that, from my father. He used to say that the mark of a great leader was on what they accomplished, it was what continued after they left. Your mother mastered that lesson. So did your father. They were both remarkable people. I'm glad their paths crossed, and I'm glad I was able to honor her memory in my courtroom, even though the circumstances were difficult. Thank you for seeing the truth, for recognizing what my father couldn't, that my mother was brilliant until the very end. Lily, anyone who read that journal would have reached the same conclusion. Your mother's competence was undeniable. The only person who ever doubted her was someone who never really knew her. She was right. Dad never knew Mom. He never understood her work, her intelligence, her strategic mind. He thought she was just an administrative assistant with a government job. He never realized he'd been married to one of the most brilliant intelligence analysts of her generation. And by the time he figured it out, it was too late. Mom had already won. 10 steps ahead. Just like always.